I want to bring in now former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, the 18th Prime Minister of Canada. Mr. Mulroney, it's good to have you on again on what is a very difficult day for so many. Let me start by asking you of your favorite memory of the Queen.
There are many. I was with her for many years and I saw a lot of her. I think in her official duties, I think her role as head of the Commonwealth and the manner in which she provided subtle but highly effective leadership in the campaign to liberate Nelson Mandela and crush apartheid in South Africa. I think in the substantive matter of her reign, that would be probably one of the top items in her own scorebook, if she looked at it that way. But I guess my personal memories of her, for example, she was coming to Canada on a trip, and we were going to have a small dinner for her on a Sunday night, and her private secretary called ahead and asked if the children could be included. We were having, I think, 3 couples as well. We had Paul and Jackie Demmer and Douglas and Susan Bassett, and John Lynch Staunton and his wife. So we said fine. So here there were Caroline, and it was about, I don't know, maybe 11 at the time, 10 or 11. There was Caroline and Ben and Mark at the table with Her Majesty, and she just treated them as if they were as important as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So she was. I thought that. I guess my memory of her is going to be that, she was an extremely intelligent woman. She had an impeccably good judgment in the way that she dealt with things. She was thoughtful, and she was witty, very witty, and she was kind. And so I have a memory of her. I conserve a memory of her great achievements on the substantive area, but in the personal way of a wonderful woman, mother, grandmother, and friend. She was a wonderful person.
What do you wish, Mr. Mulroney, more people knew about the Queen? As public as she was also a woman who was tremendously private as well. And so many people have spoken, as you have mentioned, of her wit, her charm, her humor, the fact that she was deeply engaged in political affairs, not only internationally, but also in her meetings with Canadian prime ministers such as yourself. What is something we don't know about her?
Well, we may not know of her profound attachment to Canada, which was, in my judgment, best illustrated by an anecdote that I was aware of, and President Reagan told me about. She was visiting California and had dinner with him. And he said to her something to the effect, "Well, Your Majesty, where are you going tomorrow? What do you do tomorrow?" She said, "Tomorrow, Mr. President, I'm going home." And that's the way she felt about the country. We were her second home in every which way. Look at the number of trips that she made here and her nonstop support of the country, particularly at our most difficult matters. In 1990, when we had some challenges on the constitutional front, some significant ones, she arrived and she said, "I am not a fair weather friend." And she was not. She was with us all the way in everything that we tried to do to, not just me, other prime ministers, that she tried to advance when we tried to advance the interests of Canada. So she was, I guess what people might not know about her is the extent to which she was a committed Canadian. She loved the country, she loved the people, and her conduct spoke very generously of that.
You were, of course, an anti-apartheid champion. You touched on that when we began this interview. Tell me a little bit about your interactions with the Queen during that time.
Well, the first that happened was when I got elected, and I met with Archbishop Tutu and the other leaders of the ANC and decided that we would make Mandela's liberation and the destruction of the apartheid system Canada's top priorities in among Canada's top priorities in foreign policy. And Joe Clark was with me on that. Joe did a fantastic job as foreign minister throughout. But then the next year we arrived for the first Heads of Commonwealth meeting in Nassau. And as I got off the plane, there was a message from Her Majesty asking me to come by and see her right away, which I did. And she made it pretty clear to me that she was concerned about the possible split or breakup of the Commonwealth over this issue, because, as you'll remember, while Mrs. Thatcher was a foe of apartheid, she didn't accept the Commonwealth prescriptions and leadership. And so that was generating a lot of concern in the Commonwealth and, of course, in the palace. And so she said, I want you to, if you don't mind, she said, I very much want you, Prime Minister, to use the influence of Canada, your connections around the world, your strength as a G7 leader, to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so that led to meetings in Nassau, from which a 7-man committee emerged of heads of government. We then met with her in Buckingham Palace, and then in Vancouver. And in Vancouver, before the Commonwealth meeting, heads of government meeting, of which I was chairman because Canada was in the chairman's seat in '87. I had dinner with her and Prince Philip in the Vancouver hotel, and she made it abundantly clear to me that she thought we were on the verge of something major on the negative side, and that she wanted to be certain that I understood how deeply she felt about us. There was never a political word mentioned between us, ever. She was always very discreet in that regard, but you'd have had to be pretty dumb not to recognize the body language and the genuineness, the sincerity of her comments. And so we got through Vancouver, as you know, and in good shape, and that led eventually in 1990 to Mandela's liberation, which, as she told me after, was one of the greatest moments of her reign. The Commonwealth was largely a creation of Her Majesty. I mean, she was the one who brought it to adulthood and guided it through a number of tempestuous situations. But the most important one was the confrontation over Mandela. And there, I can tell you that, because I was there with her, I can guarantee you that without her thoughtful, wise, brilliant leadership, all private, all of it, without that, that was indispensable to the success that the Commonwealth enjoyed in our two principal objectives at that very difficult time, namely the liberation of Nelson Mandela and the destruction of the apartheid system.
An unyielding commitment, subtle but unyielding commitment to being on the right side of history. You spoke there, Mr. Mulroney, about her great efforts to keep the Commonwealth united and keep it together. Is that a legacy that you feel her son, King Charles, will be able to do to the same extent? Well,
I've had the privilege of knowing Charles as well, very well, and in fact had dinner with him in London not so long ago. And he's a very competent guy, and I think he's going to be a very successful king. And he'll undertake his own challenges like his mom did. But I can also tell you that I've never met anyone in my life. I mean, remember, she met every head of government of significance for 70 years. She knew everybody from Churchill on, both in the United States, Canada, and all around the world. Her knowledge of international politics was astonishing. That's another thing that's not widely known about her. She knew a lot more than most people about a lot of things. I want to tell you that. And she was very, very good at conveying the message of what she'd like to have done or what she'd like to see. So she was unique in our history, certainly in my lifetime, she was unique. And it'll be difficult for anybody, including Charles, to match that record, because it was over 70 years that she performed so brilliantly and so effectively, both as a figure, as a regal figure on the throne, but also as a person who rolled up her sleeves and got things done, important things in Canada and in the Commonwealth, for example. So I think Charles, we're very fortunate to have him. He'll be a hugely successful king, but there'll be no one in history, certainly in my lifetime, there'll be no one in history to compare with Her Majesty.
This is an institution that goes back more than 1,000 years, and it is an institution that has had to necessarily adapt and change with the times. I'm wondering what you think King Charles's greatest challenge will be in order for him to bring a certain currency and relevance to the monarchy.
Well, she's set the pace and she's set the style, and people are going down that road. They don't want to change. They want the vision that she articulated for the monarchy and the way she lived her life. They want that in their lives. And I think it's the same thing in Canada. And Charles is very well aware of that. He's a very bright guy and a nice guy. Very, very, a great gentleman. I think that's going to become more and more apparent as time goes on. But, you know, there was just something special about Her Majesty, about Queen Elizabeth II, that none of us who knew her or were aware of her will ever forget. I certainly view her, my friendship, my acquaintanceship with her, as one of the highlights of my life, because it was an enormous privilege to serve under a person who was so thoughtful and knowledgeable and gracious at all times.
You know, in some ways, it's unfair to compare King Charles to someone as august as his mother, Queen Elizabeth. But, you know, in your interactions with him, do you feel that he has the same interest and awareness of global affairs and global politics? Certainly, we know about his climate initiatives and how he's a champion of those issues. But does he have what his mother had in terms of his interest in global affairs?
I think so. He is very devoted to the environment, which is a good thing, because with climate change, we're going to need all the help we can get. And those climate deniers who may or may not be listening tonight should take note of that. And that is a view that's widely held around the world. But I think that he'll define his own leadership, and he'll provide it, I think, in a very effective way. But, you know, and he has a great interest in foreign affairs and international affairs. I mean, I can remember many conversations with him where it was like you and I sitting down, you know, say at the King Eddie in Toronto to have a drink and to chat about people and leadership, and it was just like that, just as casual and as thoughtful. And he's a very generous guy. He's a very generous person in his observations and in his attitudes. He's not a me, myself, and I fellow at all. There's no pretense. It's like there's another thing that they have in common. His mother was completely unpretentious, and as is he. So I think that's all good news for Canadians and those of us who are privileged. Look, I once said in a major address on Her Majesty last June in Toronto on the occasion of her 70th anniversary that, you know, when you look at the news at night and you look around the world about coups and guns and violence and depressions and lack of opportunity and hopelessness for children and families, you see that in countries around the world. But you never see that in Canada. And one of the reasons why Canada has become and remains such an admired and respected player on the world scene is because our forefathers, Sir John A. Macdonald and his colleagues, were brilliant enough to devise a system of government next to the United States. It was entirely different. They had the British parliamentary system that they adopted, but they also adopted the monarchy as the guiding light of our democracy. And what is underestimated in some people's analysis is that for 155 years, Canada has gone from strength to strength. We're not perfect. And the country makes mistakes, and its leaders, including me, make mistakes. But it's gone from strength to become one of the most admired and respected nations in the entire world. And that is due in large measure, that you don't see those headlines around the world about Canada at night, is because of the construction of the instruments of our democracy led by the Crown. And the Crown, for 70 years, was epitomized by Her Majesty. And that contributed enormously to the serenity and the growth and the prosperity of Canada. I mean, her role, unspoken, unheralded, discreet, in the evolution of Canada, has been, I think, highly consequential, sometimes underestimated, highly consequential, and for which I, as a former Prime Minister, am extremely grateful.
Mr. Mulroney, powerful words, and you knew her better than many, and I really appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you so much for sharing what you remember of Her Majesty. Thank you so much.
Happy to be with you. Thank you.